Welcome to From Betrayal to Breakthrough. I'm Dr. Debbie Silber, and today's guest is Dr. Karen Parker. In a world where stress, uncertainty, and burnout are at an all-time high, Dr. Karen Parker offers something rare, a science-backed, spiritually grounded roadmap to reclaiming purpose and vitality. As the creator of quantum human design, she spent more than 3 decades blending integrative medicine research, energy psychology, and the original human design system into a modern evidence-based framework. Her latest book, Quantum Wellness, Healing Your Mind, Body, and Spirit with Human Design, blends ancient human design wisdom with quantum physics, offering a revolutionary approach to holistic healing and personal transformation. Have you ever wondered why you feel physically drained after retelling your betrayal story? Well, today I'm thrilled to introduce you to one of my teachers and mentors, Dr. Karen Parker, creator of Quantum Human Design. Karen studied directly with the founder of traditional human design and has revolutionized the system to help us move beyond just understanding who we're not to consciously creating who we want to become. What makes this conversation so powerful is the science behind it. Her research proves that victim-based narratives literally lower your immune response, while empowered stories strengthen it. If you've been stuck in stage 3, surviving but not thriving, retelling your story but not transforming it, this episode will show you exactly how to shift from cliffhanger to redemption arc. And I promise you, the process can actually be creative, playful, and even fun. Get ready to discover how human design can illuminate your authentic path, why being a survivor might be keeping you stuck, and the simple exercise that will reveal whether you're truly moving beyond your betrayal or you're just hanging at the cliffhanger. Here we go. Okay, everybody, this is such a special guest because you're meeting one of my teachers and mentors. It's so exciting. I've shared in the past, I even think I did an episode on it, on human design. Well, I learned from the best of the best of the best, and that's Dr. Karen Parker. And she is with us today to talk about quantum wellness, human design, and so much more. So welcome, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I would say I learned from you too, because I stalk you on Facebook. So there you
Well,
have it.
that's just incredible. So, it was before I hit record, I was really sharing with Karen how much I've done as far as human design, because it just makes so much sense. I mean, of course, we want to learn about ourselves in all these wonderful ways, and this is such a great way to do it because for me, I found it so different
Mm.
just from so many of the other tools and modalities that I've tried. So can we start with this? Can you just share with everybody what is, they may have even heard of human design, but what's quantum human design? And we'll take it from there.
So, human design, traditional human design, is a personality assessment system that's a synthesis of Eastern and Western astrology, the Chinese I Ching, the Hindu chakra system, and Judaic Kabbalah. It's basically a tool that gives you, based on your chart, a decision making strategy so that you get practiced in remembering what does right feel like in my body and what does wrong feel like in my body. Because for most of us, we've learned to kind of discount or devalue or even check out of our body, and we get up in our heads and we start spinning and trying to figure out and make decisions that are not necessarily for our best interest. So we get you back into the body and get you back living out what I'll call your baseline narrative, meaning the system helps you reconnect with your authentic self, and most importantly helps you remember who you're not. I think that's the really the powerful part about human design. Quantum human design is sort of what's next. So I studied with the founder of traditional human design, and in the time that I studied with him and worked for him, one of the things that he said quite frequently was that he wasn't done teaching the system, that there was more to be shared, but he passed in 2011 and he never got to share what was next. And what I found when I was working with my clients is that I started to get a lot of clients who really loved human design. They really related to some of human design, but they kept saying to me consistently, um, I really would have resonated with human design if I had heard about it 10 years ago. But since then, I've done a lot of work on myself. I've cultivated a spiritual practice. I've gone to therapy, and I don't relate to it so much anymore. That really stuck with me. And so in 2011, after Ra Uru passed, I kept sitting with this thought that what is next? What is next? If human design gets you back in the body and teaches you about how to discern who you're not in the context of everybody else's energy, how do we help people really grow into who they are intended to become? And so I took the entire traditional human design system and recodified it. I used a thesaurus and I went into a sound lab for about 3 years. And I tested the frequency of different vocabulary words and different language and came up with an entirely new vocabulary system that doesn't replace some of the core pieces of human design, but gives people intentional vocabulary and intentional narratives to help them write for themselves a story of who they choose. So traditional human design is learning who you're not, and that's really core. That helps you get back to baseline. Quantum human design is about, okay, then what's next? How do we consciously create our sovereign story of who we want to grow into becoming?
I love that. And it's even some of it's so true, because some of the words and the terms, not that they're insulting, but they're just not they don't feel as good as the ones you change them to.
They're just, I think that there are times when they actually don't feel as bad as maybe they can sound because they're where we're at, right? And I think that's really important, that sometimes when we come into any system, right, any healing modality, we come in when we're in pain. We come in when our story is broken in some way, or at least our perception of our story is broken. And so we relate to some of those shadow elements, but at a certain point, we do outgrow them if we do the healing work.
And I want to get into the healing part of this, the quantum healing part of this, but I just have to say, because those of you who listen, who watch the podcast, you will so appreciate this. There are two parts of human design that I learned about myself when I wanted to get as certified as possible, because I just absolutely am fascinated by this. And one of them was the and Karen, if you can explain, I'm a 4/6, and it
Me
was
too.
and it was my six that if I tell you, like 50 years old on the nose, that was when my life just crashed and burned, and then got started this beginning. Now I'm doing the absolute work I'm here to do. And that was, I believe that there was the six there. And another piece of this is I'm a time bender, manifesting generator, and no surprise from anyone who knows me. And one of the other things was learning that one of the things we're supposed to do when that's the case is finding the shortcuts. And it's interesting, because when I went back for my PhD,
Mhm.
the 5 stages of betrayal recovery, the 5 stages from betrayal to breakthrough showed up. And I said, oh my gosh, that's the shortcut. So
Yeah.
share with us what that means a little bit. And then I want to just dive into quantum wellness.
Well, I would say in human design, if we start to break the parts of the chart down, the different parts relate to different pieces of your story. So everybody has what's called a profile, and yours is a 4/6. And your profile kind of represents key aspects or key characteristics of the main character of your life. That's you, your manifesting generator, your time bender energy is your main character. The 4/6 has a triphasic life cycle, and in that third phase of your life, you tend to come into your maturity, if you will, around the age of 50, or astrologically when you experience your Chiron return. And basically what happens is, if you haven't completed all of your healing work, then when you hit that major life cycle, then everything that needs to fall apart falls apart, so that you can step into your purpose, which sounds is what happens to you. And that certainly is what happened to me as well. I'm also 4/6 and I'm 60, so it was 10 years ago. The second part is the second part of your conversation was finding the shortcuts. That's a key element of your main character as a manifesting generator, which is one of the 5 types in human design. There are 5 energy types in human design. Your job is to find the fastest, most effective way to do things. And that's what drives you. That sometimes causes it to look like to other people that you're moving too fast and you're skipping steps, but you're actually always exploring, how do we get to wherever it is that we're going in the fastest, most effective way possible. And I want to take fast out of that. I talk a lot about it being fast, but it's really not about fast. It's not about speed. People interpret it as speed, but it's really about efficacy and finding the most efficient way to get there, and not spending your energy on unnecessary steps. So
And it's so true, because those 5 stages can shorten people's pain by decades.
exactly,
So it's,
exactly.
and I remember learning about it. It was so confirming. So
Mhm.
let's talk about our stories, and with our audience, they've been betrayed, and they can have that mean so many different things. How do
Mhm.
our stories shape our biology or affect our biology?
That's a big question. So, well, I would say, first of all, let's take stories out of linear time, because I think if we because we want so badly to find a cause and effect, and I don't think it's always that simple. And I'd like to invite us to take stories out of time and really maybe think about once upon a time, which is a really great way to start a story, right? And it's a story that sort of takes us out of linear time. And the reason I want to take you out of linear time is because I really do want to invite everybody to step out of this idea of your thoughts create your reality, and now you had bad thoughts, and now you're being punished for your bad thoughts, and somehow, somewhere unconsciously, you created this thing, and now you got to uncreate this thing. And that's not really a helpful perspective. And I do want to say it also sometimes, especially I think when we talk about betrayal or victimization, it first of all grossly oversimplifies things. It sort of includes a certain degree of dysfunction, and oftentimes we put that dysfunction on the victim instead of on, well, I don't know if we want to call it the victimizer, because betrayal happens for many, many reasons, and it's not really somebody victimizing you per se necessarily. But sometimes we really put the onus of responsibility on the person who got hurt. What was in my mindset, my thinking, what was in my being, what was my codependent whatever that got me into this situation. And I'm not saying there aren't some really important questions that we need to look at, but to see it so linearly and so clean like that never really helps. But we do have to look at those questions. And certainly oftentimes what happens is we go into a relationship, and we bring with us in that relationship an entire suitcase, sometimes bigger than a suitcase, a big suitcase full
U-Haul.
of right, all of the things that made us who we are, including our ancestral lineage, including how we've been imprinted by our families, including familial expectations, societal expectations. I mean, there's so much that goes into it just without even looking at the energetics of it. And sometimes it's also the energetics of it. I mean, one of the beautiful things that human design shows us is that depending on how you're hardwired, you're going to have a very unique experience in a relationship. And I would say a vast majority of us are deeply conditioned to see the potential, which under different circumstances is a really great thing when it comes to relationships. It means sometimes we fall in love with the potential and we don't actually see the reality of what's happening. Or sometimes we have patterns where if we're empaths, we feel things. And as a way of managing how we feel and the intensity of how we feel, we've got patterns where we learn to be nice and to try to keep everybody happy. There's so many things that go into that. And that all of those aspects, your energy, your experiences, your conditioning, society expectations, all of that makes a story. And that story is your identity, right? And when you have this identity, you tend to call in things that validate that identity. So if you believe that you are an incredibly kind person who can see to the heart of straight to the heart of whoever, which is a great skill set to have, but isn't necessarily the best skill set to have when you date someone sometimes, right? Sometimes you need a reality check to check in to make sure, like, am I seeing the potential or am I seeing the real thing? If that's part of your story and you really identify with that beautiful, soft, loving part of yourself, which is a good thing to identify with, but you don't know where to set the boundaries on that, or you don't know how to do a reality check with that, you bring that whole story with you. That's part one. And then that story tends to create the artifact of the narrative, right? You start to experience that story in real time through your relationships. Again, not black and white, but theoretical. And then we have an experience, maybe a betrayal, right? And that betrayal gets added to the story. And oftentimes what happens is it gets added to the story, And that's where we tend to stop the story in terms of cultivating our identity. So we end the story at the cliffhanger, right? We end the story at the climax, and we fail to look at the redemption arc. We fail to realize, oh, I had this experience, but oh, here are the 10 things I learned. And the next relationship that I have, even though it also didn't work out, it got better. I got incrementally better at seeing certain pieces. And that over time, if I keep having these experiences, I'm cultivating a new narrative. And eventually I attracted a really great partner that is the partner I really, learned to be with by changing my story. But if we don't do that work to really step into the redemption arc and really start redefining who we are based on our experiences, and we get stuck in that identity of a cliffhanger. Here's an example of a cliffhanger identity. We have a tendency in our culture to define ourselves as survivors, right? That sounds great. Like, we even have a show about it. Survivors, right? The survivor. When you really break it down, what is surviving? Like, you lived. That's a kind of minimal standard, right? I lived. And, or if you go, I love the Harry Potter stories have, Harry Potter has this name, the boy who lived. Well, his story doesn't stop when he survives being attacked by Voldemort as a baby, right? But yet in our culture, metaphorically, that's what we tend to do. Many of us stop our story at that point where we survived. And then we define ourselves as, I'm survivors. We write songs about it. I'm a survivor. And I'm like, that's a pretty minimal baseline. I lived. But and then we forget in our story to go, okay, well, what's next? After we survive, how do we move from surviving to thriving? How do we use this experience as a catalyst for our growth? How do we catalyze this to shift our narrative so that we don't have to go through that again? So storytelling becomes a very powerful way to begin to integrate your identity and integrate all the shifts and changes that you made as a result of, say, a betrayal.
I love this because everybody knows I talk about the 5 stages, and this is classic stage 3. We've had our experience, we create our story, and because that's just what we know, that's what we've experienced, what we feed grows, and then we're just giving that more life, and we're living a stage 3 life, and that is just surviving. That's it.
Totally.
That's
Totally.
And this is where we have the most symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome. We have repeat betrayals because if nothing changes, nothing changes. And it's so interesting because here you're talking about when we change our story. And I think people are so afraid of that, of just making those changes. And there's a saying, and I share this all the time, and it really applies to, I have yet to find a topic it doesn't work for. And it's hard now, easy later. Easy now, hard later. Take your pick. It's one of those two. And the hard now is changing the story. But if we do, it's a whole new life. So how do you help people through your books, through your work, of changing that story? Well, I imagine awareness is first, but what do they do so that they can see the story and then change it?
Yeah, no. And I want to, this is where I like to come in and be a little bit of a disruptor, because I do think that in the narrative of healing, we oftentimes talk about how hard it is to do the healing. And I would say it's hard to go through the disruption, but the rest of it after that can actually be fun and it can be easy. And I think I really want to kind of decondition some of the narrative that we have around healing has to be a crisis, because sometimes it's not. In fact, I would say very often it's not. And you can choose to actually do it in a fun way. So one of the things that I like to do with people is actually take them through a process that I call Story Lab, which is a very fun, creative way of reframing the narrative. So what we do in Story Lab, if we do it live, which I haven't done live in a while, but if we do it live, I literally bring a whole suitcase full of dress-up clothes and glitter and paint and all kinds of creative equipment. And literally I walk people through a process of using their human design chart or an experience. You can do this as an experience too. And breaking the story down into levels. So with human design, we break the story down into the first level, which is your main character, which is the type, because in human design there are 5 energy types. We then look at the next layer, which gives us some characteristics of your main character. Then we look at what's encoded into your chart that is part of what I like to call your sacred flaw. And we all have those, right? This is the core thing that's in us that we keep bumping up against. We go to therapy for that. We every time we go through a new level of growth or expansion, we hit that same speed bump, but a different variation on the theme. We go through all of those layers in the chart, and using creative storytelling practices, gathering superpowers, getting, calling in fantastical creatures like unicorns, fairies, ancestors, whoever you want to call in. I actually take people through this process. We're using creative writing. We rewrite the story, and we rewrite the story in such a way that when you're done with the story, you are no longer sitting in a victim perspective. You're transforming the experience into what were the blessings or the lessons that I got out of this, or we rewrite it in such a way that you're no longer the victim. I'm going to share an example with you. I want to share this example very tenderly because this was this woman, one of my clients, this was her perspective. And so I really don't want to minimize some of the work that she had done before she went through the story lab process. But in her story, she had been repeatedly sexually abused as a child. And she became the protector of all of her other siblings. She's the one who took the abuse, who protected her sister from becoming abused. And she walked away, understandably, with a very victim based story. And through this process of storytelling, the way she reframed it is she came away with an understanding of, yeah, that thing happened to me, but here's the new reframe. I was strong enough and brave enough to take the brunt of this terrible tragedy to protect my family. She walked away with a complete reframe on the strength and power that she had cultivated even as a child to be able to protect herself, to stay alive, to stay, to be able to get out, to get her siblings out. And that just that simple reframe of going from I'm a victim of this experience and reclaiming her sovereignty over it and saying, nope, I actually did more than survive. I thrived. I'm married. I have a great, relationship with my husband. I have a child. My sister's good. She was able to really take that redemption arc and identify more with the redemption arc than with that cataclysmic event that happened. When we move into the creative writing process, it takes us literally out of time. It takes us into that once upon a time space. It takes us out of reasoning and logic, which is oftentimes where in traditional therapeutic practices, and again, I'm not saying don't go to therapy, because I'm saying there are great, huge benefits from people, and there's a time and a place for therapy. And oftentimes we are trying to reason and logic our way through therapeutically. And when we do that, and obviously there's also narrative psychology and reframing in there too, but when we do that, we oftentimes get stuck in those patterns that are so natural as part of the brain, right? The brain is a wildly patterned organ. And when we try to shift patterns, it oftentimes can actually cause us to retrench in the pattern instead of liberating from the pattern. When we go over here and use creative storytelling and start shifting the narrative, it gets a lot easier to see a different perspective because we're taking it literally outside of time. We're literally taking it into a different metaphorical realm. We're still playing with the same base metaphor, but we're seeing it outside of the bounds of the limitations of logic and reasoning and seeing it through a different lens that is much more possibility oriented. And then when we get that new perspective, then we can come back and do more therapy on, okay, how do we adopt and integrate this new perspective in the way that we see our lives?
It's a powerful process. And I want to know, I want to ask you what that does to us physiologically. But this is actually something that I train our coaches on when they move people from stage 3 to stage 4. One of the most powerful things they do is called a coherent narrative, which is it's that experience where you've taken your life story, you've made it a pivotal chapter of your next story. But what I love about what you're saying is you're bringing in all these different elements and really you're rewriting it. And you mentioned that it was a simple thing. It is so profound, the changes mentally, emotionally, but physically too. Can you talk to us a little bit about what changes physically when
Totally.
we do something?
Well, outside of course, changing some of the, gradually changing some of the hardwiring in the brain, what we know is that when we shift our perspective from a victim perspective to an empowered perspective, we actually can increase immune response. When we tell a story, I'll call it stinking thinking, or if we tell a stinking thinking story, it actually causes our IgA levels to drop. So when you recount something that happened to you where you felt like a victim, or you're still entrenched in the negative emotions, your immune response goes down. And if you're chronically living in that story, I suspect, we're still doing research on this, but I suspect that can have a significant impact on your long-term health and wellness. When you tell a better story, when you shift and you go through that narrative process, this is actually part of the research that I did for my dissertation, is when I walked people through that narrative reframe process and had them read the story out loud to me, We then went back and remeasured immune response, and immune response went back up. So
Mm.
the body's immune response changes and shifts in response to stories. We know that when you tell better stories over time, it turns you into an optimist, right? Because it's really what optimism is, just a reframe on the perspective. And we know that optimists live longer, they have longer telomeres, their health and wellness is better. We know that when you start to see your life and shift your life into a storytelling perspective, when you start to see yourself as the hero in your own hero's journey, then you become more resilient. You're better capable of tapping into equanimity, so that when you're sitting in the midst of a storm, you're the one that brings the calm. Your life has a different sense of meaning, and that sense of meaning gives you more motivation, more drive, more capacity to create. It increases your capability for doing. Storytelling has an incredible amount of capacity, I think, to really change and shift us. And I don't think we've tapped into what else it can do yet. I think it's so, to me, I find it fascinating that I feel like as a species, one of the things that makes us incredibly unique is I think we're the only species. I don't want to say only, because I really do have a deep love for chimps and apes, and I think maybe we just don't understand them, but I think they're pretty cool. But certainly, I mean, as primates, we are really capable of turning our experiences into narrative, and we have a long history of using narrative to transmit values, using narrative to open us up to possibilities. We know that when we tell stories together, that we actually can decrease PTSD response and increase the potential for post-traumatic growth, and that's contagious. If somebody has an experience that's similar to an experience of yours, and you've seen them grow through it, it increases the odds that you will grow through it. And it's pretty, I think it's pretty fun.
There's so much to it. And I'm so glad you shared that, because there are so many people who've been betrayed and they feel so justified in their stance. And yes, they've been wronged and they've been duped and they've been blindsided. And yes, but that story that you keep retelling, or if that's what you're doing in therapy, again, well-meaning therapists, wonderful. But if
Mhm.
that's the only thing where you're feeling heard and validated and understood, I invite everybody to re-listen, re-watch this part where Karen was sharing the negative experiences you're going to get from it. But more than that, check in with how you feel.
Mhm.
After you've shared that story again, how does your body, what is your body telling you? Does it feel
Mhm.
light, open, expansive? No, right? What is it telling you? And when you change that story, what's it giving you? And it truly,
Mhm.
truly is a choice. Karen, I can't believe it's time to wrap up. What do you want to make sure everyone knows as we start to wrap up?
So I'm going to actually leave everybody with a little bit of an exercise, because I think that's a good place to start. Take a piece of paper, turn it sideways, depending on how old you are, draw a line from one end to the other. Think of that as your lifeline. Think of the beginning on the left as your birth, the end is where you are right now. Make a list on that line, or make little hashtags on that line of all the experiences that you consider to be significant in your life. And then check in and ask yourself, did I stop my story at the cliffhanger, or have I really defined myself from what happened next? Because if you're still hanging on in the cliffhanger, you deserve better than that.
Oh, that's so powerful. Okay, you heard it, everybody. This is Dr. Karen, my teacher, my mentor, who taught me so much. And I know you shared so much with our audience today. Where do we go to learn more about you and the amazing work you do?
You can find my information about my work at my website, quantumhumandesign.com. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook, Dr. Karen Parker 22. And you can find my book, Quantum Wellness, which walks you through this process of Story Lab on any major online book retail outlet.
And I've never seen anybody produce books as quickly. It's like all of a sudden there's another one, there's another. I don't even finish reading the last one, and then here I am getting the next. And that's probably because of your human design and who you are and the beautiful message you came here to share. I want to thank you so much for your wisdom, for the way you share your information. I know you help so many people with what you shared today.
Thank you for having me.
Wasn't Dr. Karen incredible? I hope you're feeling inspired to look at your story through completely new eyes. Stay in touch with her by going to quantumhumandesign.com, and we'll have all of her information in the show notes at thepbtinstitute.com/podcast. Here's my biggest takeaway. Your body is always telling you the truth. The next time you share your betrayal story, pause afterwards and check in. Does your body feel light, open, and expansive? Or contracted, heavy, and depleted? Your body's response will tell you everything you need to know about whether your narrative is healing you or keeping you stuck. And remember Dr. Karen's powerful reminder. If you're still hanging at the cliffhanger, you deserve so much better than that. Your story doesn't end with what happened to you. It's defined by what you choose to do next and who you decided to become because of it. Also, try the timeline exercise that Karen shared. Draw that line, mark those significant moments, and honestly ask yourself, have I written my redemption arc, or am I still stuck? If you loved this episode, please share it with someone who needs to hear that healing doesn't have to be a constant crisis. It can actually be creative and transformative. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and rate and review so you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening. Can't wait to be with you next time, and here's to your breakthrough.